Hello, I'm in Morrilton, Arkansas at the Train Depot Museum. And here I'm talking with the curator, and he will tell you a little bit. The son of John Rockefeller.
Yes.
They have some stuff here, interesting history. So here is this gentleman, and I'll let you, he will introduce himself and tell you about this museum.
My name is Jerry Smith, and I'm working today to hold the museum open, but normally what I'm doing is serving as the chairman of the board for the Depot Museum. But glad to have you here today. You asked about the governor. The governor came here in 1953. He is one of the sons of John D. Rockefeller. He was a little bit different in that he was not one that was wanting just to go out and make a lot more money. He instead had interest in making a mark in a different way. So he found his way to Arkansas through another friend he met in the military, and who knew about Petit Jean Mountain, which is the state park that's not far from here. You can see it as you step out, and it's the first state park in Arkansas, but the most popular state park in the state. So he settled up there and decided to make his mark in ranching and to build a model cattle ranch and farm on top Petit Jean Mountain. So he later in in the late 60s, ran for governor, and this is the picture of him over here wearing that famous hat of his, cowboy hat, and he defeated longtime governor and very popular governor of Arkansas, Orville Faubus. He was in until the 70s, early 70s, when he was turned out. But his son, when Paul Rockefeller was then lieutenant governor after that, and he died at a fairly young age, and we have his statue in the plaza on the other side of the building here. But you want me to talk about the museum?
Yes, the museum, and also, is there any information in here about the Indian removal that came through this?
Yes, we have some. Our museum is in the train depot that's on the Union Pacific Railroad mostly between Fort Smith and Little Rock, but stopped passenger service in the mid-50s, and it was destined to be destroyed when we sort of overnight saved the building from being destroyed, and it later became a museum. We have information about the beginnings of the county, which had a fairly famous town called Lewisburg. And Lewisburg is now a ghost town. I mean, there's nothing really there now, but it was on the Arkansas River. And before that was Point Remove, a small community, and it's really most famous today because that's where the Trail of Tears, the trail that came up the Arkansas River, at least that particular trail, stopped at that point, and that is the line of the Cherokee Nation. It starts at Point Remove on the Arkansas River and goes in sort of a northeasterly direction across the state of Arkansas, and to the west of that was the Cherokee Nation. And I don't remember the dates of that. You would know that when that was started. But so the boats carrying the Indians at that point stopped, and they went overland to the Oklahoma Territory. So there's a marker on Cherokee Street, just a few blocks from here, that you can find. I'll tell you exactly how to get to that. But the land was low right there, so the settlement was moved to what's called Lewisburg. And we have a display over here that talks more about Lewisburg.
So Lewisburg, was that the encampment of the during the time of the Indian removal?
It was not. That was a few years. The Trail of Tears was 1830s, wasn't it?
Yes, 1831 was the first tribe. The Choctaws is when they started removing them, and they built the old military road for the purpose of Indian removal. And so now it was used prior to that, but they really established it for Indian removal. And then, of course, later on, the stage line. But when I visited Candron Settlement Park, that area, that settlement was used heavily through stage routes and stuff prior to removal and prior to the Butterfield stage.
And now that we're working on dates and they're coming back to me, Lewisburg actually did precede the Trail of Tears. It was 1820 when it was first established by Nimrod Menifee. And he laid the town out. It was predated a lot of the realtor developers who laid towns out. This was one of the first one in Arkansas, besides Little Rock, that was laid out in a very organized fashion, and became very popular. It was a very wealthy town because of its situation. Commerce came to and through Lewisburg. There were ships that came up and down the river and docked 6 days a week there at Lewisburg. But after the Civil War, that really was the beginning of the end for Lewisburg, because it was occupied by the Yankees for most of the war, and they dug trenches in the streets, and the train came through in the 1880s, early 79, somewhere around in there, and of course that commerce went that way, which this is where the train came through.
So I have a question about the train route. So I've noticed the old Highway 64 follows the train route, the present train route today, and the old Highway 64 followed the old stage route, and the old military road was a little further north. So was there a train route prior to the 1850s?
No, not in this area. That didn't get here until the 1880s.
1880s, okay.
Yeah, and it moved slowly. It didn't go very quickly through, even though they were given a lot of support by the federal government. They went bankrupt and had trouble getting financing to get through this area, and eventually they did, and all the way to Fort Smith. But we've got a display about one of the persons who I want to point out, as far as Trail of Tears, that is this gentleman here, Thomas Jefferson Williams, led the Trail of Tears from Memphis to here.
Is that right?
And he is my great-great-great-grandfather. He was in the federal government, or federal military, and before the Trail of Tears, and so they gave him that assignment. And then in the Civil War, he remained a Yankee and a soldier, a fighting soldier during the Civil War. So he lived in the north part of this county, and the Lewisburg and the river bottoms were the planters, and they were the Confederate folks. So it was neighbor against neighbor all through the war.
Wow.
Here in this county.
Right.
We have a big display on the Trail of Tears out here. I should remember the woman's name that did this. She's now in Florida, but she created this as part of an art contest in Little Rock, and it was put first into a park in Little Rock, and that was only temporary, so she was looking for a place to put it. So she's carved in this log the Trail of Tears story from Georgia to Oklahoma, as it goes around.
Wow.
Uh,
So so there's Tennessee. So this is very neat.
And the reason why it is a log-looking structure is her descendants were Indian, and how many back it was, but one of her grandmothers was left or got separated during the Trail of Tears, and she was a small girl, and she crawled in a log to try to stay safe, and it turned out to be a white family found her and raised her. And that was her great-great-great-grandmother. And so she did this log in memory of her Indian ancestor who was on the Trail of Tears.
Wow. Well, thank you, sir, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You bet.